Hey, Rich Fahle here. We're on the set of BookView now at BookCon 2015. We're entering into our last hour of live stream coverage. It's been a fantastic 2 days. We're going to close out our hour with guest host David Levithan. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. Glad to have you for the full hour.
Great to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. David, let's start with a discussion about your new book, Hold Me Closer, the Tiny Cooper story.
All right.
All fans of Will Grayson know who Tiny Cooper is, but you should probably tell us, who is Tiny Cooper?
Well, in the very first paragraph of Will Grayson, so it was one of John Green's chapters, we're introduced to Tiny Cooper, who is Will Grayson's best friend and is described as being very, very, very large and very, very, very gay, and is writing a musical based on his own life. And in Will Grayson, you get to see 5 or 6 of the musical numbers from this musical, some of them written by John, some of them written by me, and as soon as we were touring for the book, we knew, as soon as we were done writing the book, we knew Tiny Cooper had stolen the book from the Will Graysons. But when we were touring for the book, the reaction was so much love for Tiny Cooper. I was like, we have to actually write this musical. We have to sort of see more of Tiny and what his whole life was like. And John was like, that's great, go for it. And so I did, and that's really what the book is. It's either a novel in musical form or a musical in novel form. We haven't quite figured out which one it is yet.
Yeah, it's certainly larger than life. Tiny Cooper is an incredibly, he's large in every way, but
yes.
He's larger than life, absolutely. And he's definitely one of those characters that just you never forget. So it's fun that you decided to kind of extend this. But have you ever written musical theater before like this? I mean, this is like writing a musical?
No, I did not, and that was certainly the challenge of writing the book. I've seen lots of musicals, I listened to a lot of music, but no, I had not. And I think it is the incremental effect that I think, had I not written the numbers in Will Grayson, I would never have thought I could have pulled this off. But it was because some of the numbers were already written, and again, John had written some, I had written some. Since there was sort of already a template for it, it made it much, much easier, whereas if I had just woken up one morning and said, I'm going to write a musical novel from scratch,
yeah.
I think I would have been too freaked out to do it.
Yeah, let's set the table a little bit. You and John Green wrote a book called Will Grayson,
yes.
where you alternate chapters and wrote it together, basically. There's 2 Will Graysons. You each wrote in the voice of one Will Grayson. John wrote in the voice of the other Will Grayson. How did you decide, first of all, let's go back to that book. How did you decide to do that and to work together and collaborate?
Well, it started, I had written a book with Rachel Cohn, Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, and had loved collaborating. It was the most fun experience still to date that I've ever had writing. And so I wanted to do that more, and still do that with Rachel, but also try different things with different authors. And John and I were friends. We had met just because I read Looking for Alaska and sent him an email being like, oh, I love your book. And he was like, oh, you're the first author to actually get in touch with me about the book. And we just became friends. Because
probably other authers by now have.
Yes, I think many did after that, but I was lucky. Somebody slipped me an advance copy very, very, very early. And so I would be at my office job at Scholastic, and he would be at his office job then at Booklist. And on Friday afternoons, we'd just call each other and just chat, like just talk shop or everything. And one day I was like, hey, I had this idea, because I had this friend in college, or a friend shortly after college, named David Levithan. And we went to college together, but did not meet until the last week of school, and we were always mistaken for each other. And because of that, I'd always been fascinated with the idea of like having a double.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wouldn't it be awesome to write a double novel? Or at the time, I first proposed it with 4 different authors writing 4 different characters with the same name. And John's first reaction was, let's just do it the 2 of us. And so I was like, all right, that's cool.
Maybe more manageable, too.
Yeah, more manageable. He later joked that it meant that just we'd be splitting the money in half instead of in quarters, and that's why he said it. Who knows? Who knows how the mind of John Green works? But we just really dove into that, and we decided that we would not, instead of talking it over and trying to plan it, we would really be spontaneous. So we basically chose the name, Will Grayson. We chose where they lived and sort of where their stories would meet, but that was it. And then we went off, and he wrote his first chapter, I wrote my first chapter, and then we got together and read them aloud to each other and to his wife Sarah, and that's where it all began.
Well, where did the Tiny character come from? Was that one or the other, or were you guys just coming up with the largest character you could think of?
No, it was all John. It was all in his first chapter. I mean, literally, we were there in his apartment in New York, and he started reading and was like, about you can pick your friends and pick your nose, you can't pick your friends' noses, and then went on to that and introduced Tiny Cooper, and sort of every part of my brain was like, oh, I like this character. Oh, I can't wait. I mean, again, our chapters weren't going to cross for another, whatever, half a book.
Right.
But I was waiting. I was like, when Tiny Cooper gets into my world, I am going to use him. And sure enough, he does sort of shuttle between John's chapters and my chapters.
So did you know at the time when you sort of attached yourself to Tiny and were really liking that character that there may be more to Tiny's story that we were going to eventually find out with this book?
Not really. I mean, because a lot of the times when you write books, there are secondary characters that run off with the books. Like my first book, Boy Meets Boy, there's a character, Infinite Darlene, that like just chews up and spits out every scene she's in. She just runs away with it. But usually then that's it when the book is done. But there was something about Tiny and the reaction to Tiny that it really demanded to be heard more. And I had obviously written many other coming out stories and about other gay characters, so the question was, well, how would this be different? But because I already knew Tiny so well, I knew it would be completely different, not just because it was musical form, but because he was coming at it from a very different point of view, that he was completely accepted from the beginning and knew who he was from the beginning, so it wouldn't be a traditional coming out and the agony of misery of coming out. It really would be much more lively than that.
Yeah, well, it certainly is that. And we talked earlier, too, about the fact that you have a publishing job that you've not left. You're a very successful writer, but you're still going to work every day for Scholastic and serving in that function. Yesterday, you were here with another author that you delivered that was from the Scholastic side.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm lucky because I love playing with other people's words as much as I love playing with my own. That there is something, I was really an editor first before I became an author, and there's something about that I just think is really, it's part of the puzzle that you're trying to solve, that you're trying to make the book the best it can be. And so I love that part so much. I also don't think I'd do very well being a full-time writer. I think I can live in my own head for very short periods of time. If I had to live full-time just creating my own stories, I think that would drive me a little crazy.
So when you have so many stories as an editor in your head, maybe you're working on 1 or 2 books at a time, you have your own books and you have your own stories and your own ideation going on at the same time. How do you segment and compartmentalize your worlds?
I mean, I think it is, for me, it's a very easy calendar thing that usually during the week I work on other people's books and on weekends I work on my own, and sometimes it bleeds, but for the most part I maintain that. So it would be ridiculous of me to try to edit by day and then come home at that night and try to shift into my own story. I just can't do it. So it's really whatever project I'm working on at that very moment really has the attention of my full sort of word-based mind, and then I will switch on the weekend to my own books.
So when did you do the research for the musical writing? I mean, writing sort of a musical, you had to go find someone who could help you, guide you through that process.
Yeah, I did. I mean, it was very funny because, again, I've listened to musicals all my life. I was not an actor, and amusingly, for touring this book, I'm not a good singer, so it's made it very hard to tour the book. But I did have a friend, Hunter Bell, who wrote this show, Title of Show, which I love. And so I did just Facebook message him. It's like, hey, so I'm doing this crazy thing. Remember Will Grayson? Remember the musical number as well? I'm now doing the full musical. Could you read this? And he was very, very sweet and read it. And I did that. We had a very funny lunch because he also happens to be one of the nicest people in the world. And that isn't always the right person to ask to read your book. So he's like, oh, it's great. I'd be like, no, but tell me what's wrong with it. And he'd be like, no, it's really great. I'd be like, no, tell me. No, it's great. No, I want to know what's wrong with it. It's great. So it was very funny. But ultimately, he was like, no, genuinely, I know you will fall flat on your face if this is wrong, but I know musicals, and this works as a musical.
Wow.
Yeah.
Out of the gate, kind of nailed it, though.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, after, he certainly didn't see the roughest of the drafts. And then there was the really embarrassing part where I read my page proofs aloud every time they come in, just for one last go. So for this book, I did have to sit in my apartment alone and sing every song just to make sure that they could be sung.
By yourself, or did you have an
audience? Oh, totally by myself. I mean, I really hope that the neighbors didn't hear, because they would have been like, what is going on in that?
It works with Tiny to hear you singing.
I guess so. I wish I had Tiny's lungs, but I don't.
Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to spending an hour with you, David, and having some great guests coming on.
Yes, absolutely.
And, you know, one of the things that we're going to be talking about, too, is the initiative here at BEA for We Need More Diverse Books. do you tell us a little bit about that, and some of the people that we have are going to be talking about that as well. Matt De La Pena and Jacqueline Woodson both are involved in that organization too.
Yeah, no, it is. We Need Diverse Books was something that sprung up last year from BookCon. When the initial lineup was announced, there was just a complete lack of diversity. And instead of just taking it or complaining about it, this group of authors got together and really were activist about it and said, no, this needs to be fixed. We will help you fix it. And they did.
Yeah.
And really, from that one incident, really spawned this amazing nonprofit organization that is really dedicated to having as many voices in children's and teen literature as possible. And at this BookCon, it was great. We just had a panel this morning really to sort of celebrate everything that has been accomplished in the past year, because sort of diversity has always been something that people within publishing have supported and have wanted, but it really, with the attention and the media attention that it got, it had an extra force behind it this year, and a lot of change has actually happened. And
it's emboldening. It's giving authors an opening to sort of experiment and play with some ideas maybe that they really want to, because there's a movement in let's do this. And so I think it's pushing them out too.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to talking about that some more. I look forward to spending the entire hour with you.
Yes.
We'll be back in just a minute.